maybe he waited until things kind of died down because the fire
Hold on,
Larry
we'll get
Teis
to this.
movement,
Hold on. Give me the pitch in here in a second. Ready? 3, 2, 1. As promised, we are back. It's Scott. It's Andrew. We have the NFL draft. We have a lot of fun things happening around the Sun Belt Conference. We were debating. We flipped a coin. Where do we want to start? Start with the NFL draft, the good stuff, or do we start this podcast with even better news for me and better news probably for a lot of Texas State fans? So we're going to start with that because I'm hosting the show and I hold the reins here. Jump ahead in the podcast if you want to get to the NFL draft stuff, and we'll do all that later. But we're doing Larry Teis now. Ding dong, Scott, the witch is dead. Somewhat. And it's funny because when I saw the news immediately, I got a text right after Kev Chardello from the Statesman. He tweets out like, hey, Larry Teis is stepping down. He's no longer going to be the athletic director. And phone blows up immediately from people at Ground Zero who are like, are you seeing this? Like, when's the party? I'm like, well, I'm 2,000 miles away now, guys. I would love to have fun with you. Maybe we can get on Zoom or something, but I can't just, up and leave my great family here in North Dakota to go back to San Marcos and party, even how much I want to. Now, story is still being kind of fleshed out here. We both agree he's not being forced out, Scott. So what were your thoughts immediately when we saw Larry Teis, LT, the thorn in my side, was stepping down from AD?
I don't remember exactly which day this happened on, but I remember that my eyes just about popped out of my skull when I saw it because I never thought that this would happen. And it also comes at a weird time before you cut me off. This is what I was going to say. It almost felt like to me they're waiting for this dead period because the fire Larry Teis movement never really dies down, but it comes in waves. It just comes at a fever pitch every now and then. And I feel like they're just too proud to say, you know what, okay, I'll step down, blah, 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 blah. No, they waited until everybody's attention was on something else or whatever, sports. I don't know. It's a dead period. Nobody's really complaining right now. So maybe that's why this came right now. Either way, it's a good thing. The timing is definitely weird, so it makes me feel like that they were just waiting for a good moment to do it so that he could go out on his own terms maybe and not be, forced out by the fans, by this big push, during the football season. You don't want that on your legacy. No. So to me, it's a phenomenal thing that happened, but the timing is curious.
It was me. I take complete and total responsibility for him stepping down, Scott. I don't know why anybody else wouldn't. And I take me and all of the compatriots who donated money to have a banner fly, everybody who got sick and tired of 2-10, 3-9, who got sick and tired of compliance. Look, what has compliance ever got you? What did it get you? You get Jake Spavital, who loved the guy to death, hasn't done a ton in the win column yet. I'm going to be Team Spav till I die. But come on, we need to see a little bit of progress here, and it's fine. The hat rack that he puts his big old sombrero on at this point is that he had Texas State as a compliance. The NCAA never fined Texas State for academic problems. He had Texas State's women's sports churning and burning. Soccer is kicking butt, volleyball was kicking butt, basketball was kicking butt. All of that's great. It matters winning. And basketball for the last decade has been kind of up and down. In the last 3 years, it's been really good. But the 7 years before that wasn't anything to write home about. And football has been bad as long as we've been alive, Scott. As long as we've been watching football, Texas State football has not been a team to compete with. And they get in the Sun Belt Conference, and immediately they see teams pass them up. And the little brother down the road at UTSA passed them up. And this is the one that got me. I had a friend of mine, very connected to Texas State. She didn't know that Teis had been employed at the university since 1997. He had been employed longer than she'd been alive, Scott. And for what? For what? like you go around, you see all these other teams winning. Troy, staple of the Sun Belt Football Conference. Coastal Carolina, up and comer. App State, winning every other year, getting national recognition. And we're going to talk about national recognition when we get to the draft. Texas State isn't a small school. It's like 40,000 kids strong in the middle of the hill country. And nobody can point at it on a map. That's a problem. Larry Teis they had no solutions for that. So I am so happy that he's gone. I did a somersault. I did cartwheels. And like, it's hard for me to kind of put myself in other people's shoes in the conference to completely understand like how Texas State fans feel. And the problem is, Scott, is that he's not completely gone. He's still keeping an administrative role, which I don't even know what that means at this point.
I like to feel like I contributed as well. I remember writing a story 2 years ago, maybe, that was all about Larry Teis, and I interviewed, 10 different people. And the common theme about Larry Teis and why he was a bad AD, I think I talked to you too, yeah. But the common theme was that he was not a people person and really horrible at marketing his program. And this is big because, as you mentioned, Texas State is a huge school. I didn't even know it was 40,000 kids. At Troy, we have 8,000 kids, and marketing is not an issue here. So at Texas State, you need somebody that can push out the name of the Texas State Bobcats and push Texas State sports. Larry Teis has been the opposite of that guy, from what I can see. Nobody talks about Texas State. They're non-existent in Texas football to me. When you talk about Texas football, when you talk about Florida football in the last few years, you cannot talk about Florida football without talking about UCF. Florida Atlantic has grown its brand in recent years. Texas State needs that, and they can be that in that state. Larry Teis was never going to be the guy that was going to bring Texas State to that level. There's a funding issue in Texas State. There are people that are withholding their donations and they've stopped giving their donations because of Larry Teis. In Texas State, I think the funding and the financial potential of that university is through the roof. When you have an alumni that's as big as what they have, you could be bringing in all sorts of cash. Larry Teis is not the guy to do that. He never, ever was. So, yeah, this is a big about damn time moment for Texas State.
For sure. And it's like the other thing that I think is really funny here is like you mentioned, marketing was his like thing. Like when he was at TCU before he came to Texas State, he was like in charge of marketing, which is really confusing considering how bad he has been at that juncture. I think this is the other weird thing. So the guy who replaces him right now as the interim athletic director is a guy in-house. And look, we have had this metaphor bounced around for the last like 3 years. One bad apple ruins the bunch. I'm not saying that Larry Teis ruined the entire athletic department. I'm not saying that everybody that he has hired is bad. I'm just saying that Danny Casper didn't get fired until players had to come out and say bad things about him in the press. So I'm just, I'm hesitant when we hire from within at Texas State because maybe the guy that replaces him is great. I've heard really good things about Don, who's going to replace him. I've heard really good things. I kind of want to see what else is out there. I kind of don't want to settle down for the first girl that asks for a dance. Like let's shake and bake a little bit. There's got to be somebody at Alabama or Auburn who is like 33, who's looking for a job to run like an athletic department. Let's go get that guy. Let's go get the next, I don't know. Crystal Conte. Let's go get the next Crystal Conte. Have this be the first stop on his Wikipedia page before he goes off to become the new AD at Michigan or Notre Dame or something. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of what I want right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think you want to go out and get higher fire is what you want to do. Somebody with energy, somebody with a lot of desire to really build something from the ground up. Basically, this obviously would not be a ground up situation, but you have to attack it like it is, in my opinion. And you can't go get an established figure who is 62 and has slowly but surely climbed the ladders of college athletics. Because when you do that, you get so comfortable in those roles that you're not really coming at everything with energy. It's all experience that you're leaning on, which is great, sure. But you need to be somebody who can go to the crowd and rally that crowd around you and your program. You can't have somebody that's going to be hiding behind a desk for their entire career. You got to get somebody who's going to go out and face the people and talk to the people and mingle with the people. And that is what a young up and comer, maybe like you said, somebody at a Power 5 who's got a deputy AD role somewhere. Go and get that guy. You might hurt some feelings in your own office. It doesn't care. It doesn't matter. Like, go get somebody who can do the absolute best job with the most energy possible.
And this is what I said too, Scott, as I was like, immediately when we were talking about we need somebody from like not a ground zero point of view, but like somebody who can help like build the program up. I said, let's go get somebody that was in charge of UAB's football resurrection. No, seriously. Like, I don't know why you wouldn't go get somebody like that, or somebody who is like, I know football centric. You want somebody that's going to be well-rounded, that cares about tennis and everything, but it's Texas State. We're talking NFL draft. We're going to go find somebody that's NFL or, football centric to be the athletic director. I think that's what you got to do in the Sun Belt Conference.
Yeah. I mean, you want somebody that's going to be fired up about every single sport, but somebody who's going to understand that you've got this front porch sport that is going to bring in the most, the majority, the bigger piece of the pie. And so you've got to have somebody that's ready to, push that football program. And that's really important because that Texas State, there's so much there in that football program. You've got this beautiful stadium. Everybody I've ever talked to about, what's the best looking stadium in the conference? It's always either Troy or Texas State. Every single time I hear somebody talk about it. But that Texas State football stadium is empty every single Saturday. You got to get somebody in who's going to put butts in those seats.
And I joked about this with a guy before, and I said that, like, I don't know what's worse, the fact that the seats are empty or the fact that the press box is empty. Because the fact that the seats are empty means that the students are so apathetic to it that they don't care to come to the games. And that's bad, and that looks really bad on TV, and it looks really bad for the players and morale. From a media side, the fact that the press box is empty means to me that nobody's covering you either. And the fact that you have like this program that is dying for attention in this, blossoming media market in Austin, San Antonio, the fact that nobody wants to come and even check you out, and that the arena football team was filling up the stadium, that's a problem to me. The media box at an arena football game was more full than a Texas State football game. That's a problem.
Yes, it is. And I hope that Texas State fixes it. I honestly do hope. We were just talking about, you guys know him, the Boomer guy on Twitter who posts all the rankings and whatnot that annoy and frustrate every single Twitter user that's ever logged onto Twitter. I just posted a list of graphics for college football sleeping giants, and Texas State was on that list. And I said that I kind of agreed with it, especially if we're talking about just within the Sun Belt. Texas State, to me, is a sleeping giant. You are in the middle of one of the best recruiting hotbeds in the entire country. You're a ginormous school. You've got an amazing football stadium to play in. You've got a beautiful campus. Why wouldn't you want to play football at Texas State? Here's why. Texas State is garbage and always has been. Fix that. Get a few players in, get some talent in, develop them. I think that's what the previous coach really struggled with, the development part and the actual on-field coaching. But I know you're a big Spav fan. I feel like Spav can do those things. Bring in the good players, bring in get the development, get the coaching down, but you've got to have your over-the-top guy.
It's looking right now. It's looking right now that he's like, screw the development. We need to get established players.
No. Absolutely, yeah. That's an entirely different conversation. I think a lot of G5 coaches are going to go that route. where you're just bringing in a ton of transfers, especially with the brand new rule that you can transfer once. The first time you transfer in your career, you can play right away. I think a lot of G5 teams, I think Troy, I think Louisiana, there's at least one more that brought in a lot this year, but you're going to see a lot more of that.
This is great.
You're going to see it. Yeah, really cool. Texas State, it's not a bad thing to me. But I agree. Going back to it, digressing. Texas State to me is a sleeping giant within the Sun Belt. I said it before, like in week 1 of last season, that the Sun Belt would do so well if Texas State had a good football program. If they were that team that were challenging with Louisiana and Arkansas State out west, the Sun Belt would be so good. It would be pushing the American Conference because you would have those teams at the very top competing with each other with 1 or 2 in the top 25. And with such a small list of teams, only 10, and you've got Texas State up there, you've got a four deep look at the very top of the conference. No other team would do what Texas State could do to the Sun Belt.
All right, let's move on to the NFL draft. I think that's enough Texas State football talk for the listeners. All right, let's get into the NFL draft, where we saw 4 Sun Belt players get drafted, and then we saw a ton of Sun Belt football players sign as undrafted free agents. And I don't know the number from last year, but I was talking about it with you before we came on air, and I was saying that it felt like last year the draft was later. It felt like it was like darker. I don't know what it was. I was more tired. I don't know. I'm very awake and very active right now on who is getting picked, who's getting picked up. We saw a couple names go higher than I think we thought they were going to go. So I'll let you take the floor here. Let's start. What was your reaction to draft day?
We saw 4 players go. That is that's almost half of what we had last year. We had 7 players out of the Sun Belt drafted last season. So it's kind of surprising to only see 4 go, especially with some of the players that did not get drafted, which we'll talk about. But the very first player that went 5th round, Green Bay Packers took Shamar Jean-Charles out of App State. This guy got off to such an insane start. I think he had like 8 pass deflections in the first 2 or 3 games of the season this past year. He was ridiculous. And I've got one stat for everybody. You had to sit through and talk to me while I found all of these stats earlier. This is what I've come up with. He had 30 pass deflections in his career since 2017. Actually, that is the most in App State's FBS history. And the second most is only 13. This guy was insanely productive at App State. You couldn't throw to his side. What was surprising, he only had 2 interceptions his entire career, but he had 28 pass deflections. You could not throw to this guy and expect to have a pretty good QBR at the end of the game. Shamar Jean-Charles is going to make a good fit in Green Bay. I think Green Bay was willing to take a flyer out on him because they have another Sun Belt corner on roster right now. That's former Georgia State corner Shandon Sullivan. So they got 2 Sun Belt guys in their secondary now, and that's really great. I think I see this a lot in the NFL where a team kind of sticks with a conference or a player or a conference and a team over like a period of years, and I feel like this has something to do with it. I feel like they feel comfortable taking this guy because they've taken Shandon Sullivan. And I know that Sullivan has done well in Green Bay since he got drafted or picked up, however it went down. But good pick. I would have taken Jean-Charles earlier.
No, okay. Let's put an asterisk here because I think both of us have a little bit of a bias, would you say, towards Sun Belt players that we think like, probably should go a little bit further ahead than they did.
I'm not like that with most of these guys, with at least one of these guys. But I feel like the corners in this draft just weren't quite as good as the past. I think the very top was very good. And I think that it just kind of fizzled out kind of quickly. So I feel like Jean-Charles is somebody that could have gone a little bit earlier just because of that, just because of what was available at that position. That makes sense?
He could have gone 5, like in the 5th round, or he could have gone in like the 3rd round, like a late.
He went really late 5th round. I feel like he could have gone earlier, like early 5th round or possibly 4th. But he got drafted. At the end of the day, it's all that matters.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's move on. We're talking about the best defensive player in the Sun Belt Conference in Teron Jackson, the Chanticleer who I think, didn't we vote him as the defensive player of the year? Or he was in the running for defensive player of the year for our Sun Belt football team.
Yeah, he was our defensive player of the year, and he was the official Sun Belt defensive player of the year.
I don't really care what the Sun Belt
Jackson.
thinks.
No, the Sun Belt doesn't matter. Only us. We're the only awards that matter. I'm not too surprised actually that he went in the 6th round, because he did not display at his pro day, which also doubled as the combine day because there wasn't actually an on-site combine this year. He did not impress strength-wise on the bench press. He had the same number of reps as an Arizona State punter did last year. So I think that might be part of the reason why. No, I think that might be part of the reason why he fell down a little bit. But it is impossible to ignore the production that he had. He had 42 tackles for loss in his career, 24 and a half sacks. That is the most in the Sun Belt since 2017. You had the game plan around it.
Now, what do you think about that? Because you just mentioned he didn't show up really good on the strength and conditioning, but the Chanticleers, as an offensive line and a defensive line, looked like the best groups in the Sun Belt, I thought. I thought that they kicked ass on both sides of the ball. So why is it that he showed so poorly in that combine? Because I have my theory on why.
Well, I'd love to hear your theory then.
All right. So my theory is that the Chanticleer defensive line and defense is just a whole worked together like an ant colony, right? And I thought about this when I saw him barely getting up those bench presses on Twitter. I said that I think that this defense works as like an ant colony, where like a single ant cannot pick up a cracker, but a ton of ants can pick up like an entire lollipop. You know what I mean? Like one ant's not going to ruin a picnic. A swarm of ants ruins the entire day. The Chanticleer defense is special last year because they played like a single person, like a single great defense. And that's why I think him going in the 6th round makes a lot of sense. And it actually gives me a little bit of pause because I'm worried about what he's going to be able to do when he plays for the Eagles. Because the Eagles already have kind of like an okay defense. Maybe he gets some snaps by like week 6 or 7 because of injuries and stuff. If he doesn't show up, I don't think he's going to be on an NFL roster super long. And that makes me a little bit concerned.
You know, I hate to hear that, but it's not that far-fetched of an idea. And what you said makes a ton of sense for anybody that has watched Coastal Carolina this past season, watched them play defense. That whole thing from the front to the middle to the back, star players everywhere. And so it's easy, I guess. You can't double team Teron Jackson. If you double team Teron Jackson, Jeffrey Gunter comes around the other side. CJ Brewer's in the middle. If you double team Teron Jackson, Teddy Gallagher or Silas Kelly might come through on an A gap blitz, B gap blitz, or something like that. You can't do these things, and that might have beefed up the production numbers that we saw from Teron Jackson. It might be a big reason combined with his strength why he fell all the way into the 6th round. So it makes a lot of sense. I do hope that he gets it together, that he beefs up a little bit. I think what really needs to happen, looking at Teron Jackson, I always thought he was kind of beefy for his spot. I feel like if he slimmed down, then regained the muscle, I feel like he would be in a really good position at that point to contend in the NFL.
So do you think that he's going to continue to play defensive line, or could we see him like turn into like an edge rusher?
I think if he slims down, I think he could be an edge rusher. I think that I don't want to say he's very tall.
No.
I really don't know. I think he's kind of short a little bit. But, yeah, I could definitely see him as an edge rusher. Jeffrey Gunter played that position for him last year. But it's just that, like I said, he's a little chunky, he's a little beefy, and that's why he's on that defensive inside. If anything, an NFL team could decide to just pump him full of steroids and protein and pizza and move him inside. Put him at defensive tackle or something like that.
That first time you start working out with Fletcher Cox is really, I think, going to be an eye-opening experience for you. You know what I mean? Like that'll be the thing that changes it maybe. All right, let's talk about another 6th-round pick, Elijah Mitchell, who goes to the 49ers. Now, the 49ers made a splash in the 3rd round, drafting Trey Lance, which we don't need to really get into. I talk about Trey Lance every single day if you're in North Dakota because he's an icon up here. What'd you think of the 49ers pick?
I'm glad that they took Elijah Mitchell. I was surprised. I was following along on the NFL draft tracker, and they had their little grade next to every player. They actually had Trey Regis rated higher than Elijah Mitchell, which was very surprising to me because Regis is that big back guy who gets the tough yards and in between. And I feel like you kind of find those all over the place in the NFL. Elijah Mitchell is somebody who does a lot of different things and does them very quickly. And I think that's what separates him a little bit and makes him a draft worthy player. So good pick, in my opinion. I like Elijah Mitchell. I feel like if CJ Merrill was a little bit bigger, we would have seen him drafted around the same place. But Elijah Mitchell is definitely a nose for the end zone type of guy who will go get the end zone however he needs to. He had 46 total touchdowns in his career, which is, I think, top 5 or top 10 in Sun Belt history for running backs. He was that guy. I mean, every time he touched the football, it something could happen. Explosive plays. I mean, that's what he did, whether he was catching the ball, running the ball, in between the tackles, outside the tackles, perimeter. It didn't matter. Downfield did not matter. Elijah Mitchell wanted the front end of the goal line his entire career. Honestly, thank God he's gone. Him and Trey Regis, because those guys were problems at Louisiana. And they're both gone. They're both gone. We can all celebrate. They're both gone. I don't know what else Billy Napier has. I know he's got Chris Smith, who looks amazing, but is he as good as Elijah Mitchell? Trey? That doesn't matter. Elijah Mitchell, 6th round, 49ers. Good pick.
He's going to be a good practice squad guy, I think. I don't know if he's going to be getting the reps ahead of Mostert or some of those other guys who the 49ers have in that running back room, but they needed somebody. They needed to draft a good running back. So maybe he's the guy. I don't know. Maybe he is. But
the way I see it, Raymond Calais, he's gotten NFL opportunities. He was like the 3rd running back last year on Louisiana's roster, or the year before, 2 years ago. The 3rd running back. And if he can get his practice squad opportunities and spend a week or two on the active roster, I feel like Elijah Mitchell has a pretty good shot.
All right, let's talk about Sean Payton probably making a mistake, ? Taking Kawan Baker, who, not a mistake because they picked Baker, but a mistake because I think that there was another wide receiver we both like a little bit more out of the Sun Belt Conference who should have gone in the NFL draft that didn't. We'll get to him in a second. South Alabama wide receiver.
Kawan Baker. I've watched Kawan Baker for a few years now. He's never stood out to me as an NFL wide receiver, so I was kind of surprised to see his name called today. I've seen him described as a bigger wide receiver. I don't know if I've ever even looked at him like that either. Yeah. You can't deny the production there.
Pause. Why do you need a bigger wide receiver if you're the Saints, who throw the ball more than like any other team? What do you need?
See, I don't even agree that he is the bigger wide receiver type that you're looking for. For me, he's always been more of an inside guy. Like he fits that kind of role. And maybe it might be his production levels at South Alabama. He's never had a good quarterback ever. He's never had, a good team around him. And he is 1st in South Alabama history in receptions, 1st in receiving yards, and 1st in touchdowns. I mean, you can't deny these things that he's done in college. But I figured he'd get picked up undrafted free agent. That was my guess coming into this thing. He should not have been the Sun Belt wide receiver that got drafted today. I love Kawan Baker. Maybe not. He played for South. I like his game. I have nothing against Kawan Baker. But there was one guy that you said, Jonathan Adams, Jay Adams at Arkansas State, did not get drafted today. How? Omar Bayless didn't get drafted last year, but Jay Adams to me is better. Like, you could not avoid Jay Adams. This dude, you throw this football within 10 feet of him, he will catch it somehow. I've seen him make the most ridiculous high degree of difficulty catches in the last year alone that to me warrants a top 5 round draft pick on him. I can't think that there's that many wide receivers better than Jay Adams.
What didn't make sense to me either was the fact that teams like the Raiders, who we watched draft all weekend, that clearly, I don't know what their scouting department does besides watch ESPN top 10 plays, and the national championship. I do not know what their scouting report is on some of these guys with the picks that they were making. But Jay was on SportsCenter every other week. Jay was on every single highlight reel from the 2021 season. Like, how and why? It's just mind-boggling. And, we're not NFL scouts, shocker. But I will say that I'm a okay football fan, and I'd say I'm a pretty good analyst when it comes to, college football stuff. I'm looking at it this way, man. I have not seen a wide receiver in the Sun Belt Conference who did more, honestly, with a little bit less than Jay Adams. The season's done. We can kind of look at it in retrospect. His quarterback play wasn't great. So I'm looking at it like, okay, we got a guy who's uber talented, who made every single tough catch, tough play, who I had not seen drop a pass. I saw Jeremiah Haydell, one of my favorite receivers ever, drop a pass. And I was like, oh, bad day. I don't know what happened. Girlfriend broke up with him. I don't know what the deal was. Dropped a pass. It was uncharacteristic. Jay Adams, I never saw drop a pass. In all the games I watched, never saw him drop a pass. At least one that I can think of right now. I don't know what I'm missing. I don't know what the NFL scout is missing, because clearly we're not on the same page here.
Exposure is not a problem. All you have to do is pull up the tape from the Kansas State game. Dude destroyed. He bodied every Kansas State DB that checked him. That's all you got to do. Just turn on that game and turn on the Georgia State game. The Georgia State and Arkansas State game was the funnest game of the year.
And it's not like Kansas State was a pushover. It's not like Kansas State's defense got carved up by Kansas. So I don't know what we're missing.
It's not like they didn't even get carved up by Arkansas State that day. They just got carved up by Jonathan Adams. Okay,
Scott, now give me some other Sun Belt players who went undrafted but got signed by teams right afterwards.
All right, so I got a big fat list. It's probably not exhaustive, and it will probably get bigger after this podcast ends. The first guy I saw was Jonathan Adams, got picked up by Detroit. I'm going to refrain from the Calvin Johnson comparisons because it's not fair. But I don't know. I feel like Jay Adams in that one microcosm of 2020 was the Calvin Johnson of Sun Belt football that year, I think last year. If we were to if nothing existed but the Sun Belt football season of 2020, that's my comparison right there. I actually have another good NFL comparison for you. Hold up. Yeah. Coastal Carolina's CJ Marable, who I mentioned earlier, he got signed by the Chicago Bears. I don't think you can avoid the Matt Forte comparison here. Matt Forte was a phenomenal receiving running back, was he not? CJ Marable is that type. He's that guy. He was probably the best. CJ Marable was probably the best receiving back in Sun Belt history, for being honest. So I feel like I know that this is a completely different offense now. We're a decade into the future since then, but bring it back. Let's use Marable as that dual threat running back that Matt Forte was.
I like that. And the fact that James Robinson last year went from undrafted to rookie of the year to fantasy MVP in a lot of leagues, I could see Marable. I don't know if I'm going to spend a fantasy pick on him, but I am going to be looking at him for keeper leagues as flag and stash type of guy, somebody I'm going to keep an eye on going forward. I like that comparison to Matt Forte. And they have Justin Fields, who looks to be the number one quarterback in Chicago. So I don't know if you really want to put rookie running back, rookie quarterback together before week 6 or 7. I want half a season to go by before I'm putting these young guys on the field together. But I am excited to see what Fields and Marable can do together.
ULM tight end Josh Peterson signed with San Francisco.
Now that's a great signing.
Yeah, Josh Peterson, he's been a consistently great tight end in the Sun Belt for a few years now. Last year, I don't think he did much of anything. That's nothing against him. If you saw the ULM situation, you cannot knock Peterson. You can't knock Josh Johnson for what their stats showed last year. Josh Peterson was a guy who I think tested the transfer portal twice in his career. I think he was actually initially going to return to ULM, and he chose to go the NFL route without an announcement. The same thing happened with Josh Johnson. He chose to go the NFL route without an announcement. And I think Corey Strider may have done the same, though I have not seen his name pop up in undrafted free agent signings yet. But Strider was a guy that last summer we were talking about being one of the G5's best corners, and he got hurt early on. We haven't heard from him since. But yes, Josh Peterson in the NFL. It's a great pickup. Riley Cole, South Alabama linebacker. He's in Kansas City. He's with the Chiefs. Let's see, a big name. Well, we'll start with Trey Regis, I guess. Trey Regis got signed by Las Vegas, the Raiders. That is one of my most interacted with tweets on this list, by the way. Louisiana fans love them some Trey Regis. You want a big name? How about long snapper Brian Langan? Superstar of the Sun Belt. Never heard of this guy before about an hour ago. He got picked up by the Los Angeles somebody's. Perhaps the Chargers. I didn't write their team name down.
You can tell the prep work we do over here. Look, let's start let's start back with the tight end because I like the pairing. Shanahan's a genius when it comes to offenses. He's already got George Kittle, who was a 5th round player. So I would be remiss if I did not mention that going undrafted to a team like the 49ers, to a team honestly like the Packers, to a team like the Panthers is a really good move because all of those head coaches between LaFleur and Shanahan and, Rule, all those guys can make talent work if you give them the right pieces. So I'm very excited for any of those guys. I will say this, though, because I've been thinking about this since you mentioned it earlier in the podcast, where teams will kind of glum onto a certain conference or a certain team in a conference and kind of just use that as a machine, bring players in. Have you noticed that no Sunbelt players go to New England? I was thinking about that because New England goes for the SEC to go to Alabama. Clearly, that's the well that they go to. Very few Sunbelt players end up on the East Coast. Like Mayo, but he signed as a Giant in the offseason. But I can't think of any Sunbelt players off the top of my head that get drafted by East Coast teams like that. Northeast teams, I should say.
Drafted, I don't know. I can literally think of one Troy player that at some point had some kind of deal with New England a long time ago, but I have no idea if that was an undrafted free agent thing, if that was just a practice squad thing. I don't know. But yeah, I can't think of anybody.
Jeremiah Hayden signed with the Rams after Brian London a season ago was an undrafted free agent that was signed by the Rams to the practice squad, the training squad, something like that.
Does Carolina count as East Coast?
No, that's South.
Technically. Okay, well, technically, Josh Norman was at Sunbelt at the time. Coastal was still in the FCS. But yeah, Jim Haydell with the Rams. Let's see, Forrest Merrill was somebody that Arkansas State fans were looking to get drafted. He signed with the Los Angeles Chargers. So I got a few people going out west. Regis to Las Vegas, the long snapper to the Chargers. Merrill to the Chargers, and Haydell to the Rams. And Josh Johnson's going to Seattle.
A lot of West Coast, not a lot of East Coast.
Well, how about this for East Coast? Georgia Southern defensive lineman Raymond Johnson. He got signed by the New York Giants.
So that's a good one.
Yeah, it is a good one. Raymond Johnson's probably one of the bigger names on this list as well.
Do we want to spend the remaining of this podcast doing what we do best, shitting on Zach Wilson? Let's start.
Yeah, sure.
I'll start. So we knew months ago that Zach Wilson was going to be the number 2 overall pick. We had heard the intel. We read the reports. You, like I, had seen what ESPN and The Athletic was writing about Zach Wilson being the savant when it came to reading defenses and recall and knowing where plays happen and stuff like that. Okay, so then, of course, you have the media stooges who have to get behind these NFL teams because you got to make your NFL source look good. Hey, the front office at so-and-so team says Zach Wilson's like a genius. I get all my information from that team. I got to make him look good. So then we saw for the last 2 months the same clips of Zach Wilson playing at BYU. Note, most of the clips were played at home in BYU. So teams were having to travel to Utah to play Zach Wilson. and they always left out the clips that we as Sun Belt fans continue to play on repeat. There's clips of him playing against the Chanticleers and Coastal Carolina punching him in the mouth, both figuratively and literally. And it was disgusting. And he went number 2 overall. And if he stinks in New York, I like the kid, he looks like he's 12, whatever. But I'm looking at it like this. If he stinks in New York, we were on this hill before anybody else. Zach Wilson, overrated. Overrated.
Absolutely, you're right. Those highlights were missing a little bit of teal in them. And I'm curious to know how many defenses that Zach Wilson played this year that had a NFL defensive lineman on the other side of him, because there was one at Coastal, but I don't remember anybody else. Who they play? Did they play in the bowl game? Who did BYU play in the bowl game? I don't know. Doesn't matter. You're looking it up? I can see it in your glasses.
We're pulling up the BYU schedule for 2020.
How many Western Kentucky players were drafted?
That's true. There's not a lot. BYU, they also, I think they've ducked a bunch of people too. Remember who was a team that they were trying to get? Was it Ohio State that wanted to play them?
So there was a Big Ten team. Yeah, somebody in the Big Ten wanted to play BYU.
Right, so,
it was a Big 12. No, it was a Pac-10 team. I think it was Washington was trying to play them.
Yeah, I think it was Washington. All right, let's go through it. They kicked the shit out of Navy. They kicked the shit out of Troy. They kicked the shit out of Louisiana Tech. They barely beat UTSA. They kicked the shit out of Houston. They took Texas State behind the dumpster. Western Kentucky, they beat the brakes off of. Boise State, they beat the brakes off of. North Alabama, they beat the brakes off of. They went to Coastal Carolina and got their lunch money taken. Then they beat San Diego State. And then they beat the ever-living dog shit out of UCF. So,
for whatever reason, I thought UCF played Marshall in the bowl game. Maybe think of something else.
They did not do anything last year. Zach Wilson's a fraud. And they should have drafted Justin Fields. So, I'm on that hill. Justin Fields at the worst. Right now, actually, let me put it this way. Yeah, Justin Fields at the worst, Trey Lance at the best. They should have gotten Trey Lance. Very high on Trey
Lance. What I kept hearing about Zach Wilson, and we talked about this before, I think in the last podcast, was how well he does under pressure. Yeah. And I'm glad. I was wanting to post that video, just put the clips together, and I think Barstool Sun Belt beat me to the punch. And he posted the video, yesterday, whenever it was. And it was Zach Wilson throwing a shitload of incomplete passes under duress against Coastal Carolina. He did not look good under pressure. And I guarantee you that was the only game where he faced it consistently. And he did not look good in that contest.
What bothers me so much is I don't know what the Sun Belt did to piss off their television partner, but ESPN did not bring it up nearly enough on the Jets. And maybe it's because Jets fans are so beaten down and worn down.
You can't bring that up. You can't bring up Zach Wilson had a bad game against Coastal Carolina.
But we do it. But it's so frustrating because we do it.
You hurt your ratings. Nobody, ESPN, those guys, nobody badmouths a top end prospect. Nobody ESPN tries to say, you know what, maybe this guy's not very good, so let's not market him. No.
That's why you come here, folks. That's why you come to this podcast to get to have top end prospects badmouthed.
You've got to hype these guys up in the event that they do play well. And if they do play well, they're already very popular because you've hyped them up. And it's just the big circle. You can continue to hype them up and you can make your old money off of covering this guy who is playing well. And he's already popular because you hyped him up.
It's a feedback loop. It's a human centipede of media.
Zach Wilson sucks. The Jets suck. They will never be anything.
All right, well, the next time we come to you guys, we're going to be talking about spring practices, probably. We're going to be talking about –
Are we?
Probably. And we'll probably be talking about what teams that we expect to do well. And by then, we probably have more draft picks that have been signed. So, for Scott, for myself, thank you so much for watching and listening to us continue to badmouth Zach Wilson to the day that we die.
Bye.